Hello, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of GeoSpace. I'm your host, Mohammed Salih. Glad to have you with us for another edition of GeoSpace, the new regions bi-weekly podcast where we explore the shifting dynamics of Middle Eastern geopolitics. Today, I'm thrilled to be joined by Sardar Aziz. Sardar is a lecturer, researcher, and columnist. He previously served as a senior advisor to the Kurdistan Parliament in Iraq. He is an expert on Kurdish and regional affairs with a growing body of work on China's involvement in Iraq as well. He holds a PhD from University College York in Ireland with a focus on the state and modernity in the Middle East. In today's episode, we will be discussing the recent 12-day conflict between Israel and Iran and its far-reaching repercussions for the Kurds across the region in Iraq, Turkey, and Syria, as well as in Iran itself. That conflict ended with the US brokered ceasefire announced by President Trump on June 24th. Before we dive in, a quick reminder, you can find GeoSpace on the New Regions website under the Watch section, and we are also available on YouTube and SoundCloud. If you are interested in reading more, I've written a piece on the new region analyzing the implications of the Israel-Iran conflict for the Kurds, and you can check that out as well. Sardar, welcome to GeoSpace. It's great to have you with us.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the opportunity. Looking forward.
Let's begin with the big picture. The region just witnessed 12 days of intense conflict. For the first time since the end of the Iran-Iraq War in 1988, Iran came under direct attack by another state. And also notably, the US joined in striking key Iranian nuclear facilities. Let's start with some broader questions first. How is this conflict and its outcome going to reshape the strategic balance of power in the region, especially between Iran and Israel?
Yeah, the conflict or the war has a name. It's 12-day, similar to the 6 days war, and I think it will have similar or even bigger implication in my view. In the last 2 decades, I think Iran was trying hard to keep all the threats away from its kind of national territory, and that was seen as the core of the Iranian strategy. And this has a root, goes back to the Shah, and I think it's well documented that the Shah security apparatus and their regional strategy was that we go to fight in Lebanon in order to keep our Iranian territory safer or away from the bloodshed. So that has been basically a similar kind of a strategy of the Islamic Republic and Islamic Republic, in order to maintain that, in order to manifest that, has built a number of deterrents. Among them, the militia from Lebanon to Syria to Iraq to Yemen to and I think expanding in other places, but not to that degree. And also having missile have and working hard on a nuclear weapon. I think this whole deterrence now we see has kind of collapsed, and the threat has reached inside Iran, and the threat has reached not in a kind of a traditional way, in a very advanced artificial intelligence, in a very advanced kind of new way of war. I think we have seen now Iran lost its control over its sky, over its ally, over its kind of all this stockpiles of weapon has built. So all these came as a shock, and uh, we have seen now it kind of Israel has what Israel lost on the 7th of October was the deterrence, and now probably has built it in far greater degree. And probably that will have implication in a way that we hear from the theocratic aspect of the uh, parties within Israel that it's a time for greater Israel. It's a time for um, becoming a power that could reshape the region and end the threat of Israel. And the main threat came from Iran. And I think also it is non-state actor. These are all now either severely weakened or almost gone. Um, this is, I think, done with the support of the U.S. What I see from in the last war, it was a very different type of relationship between United States and Israel, and the Gulf country has contributed into that also. I think the fall of Assad was a big bonus for the Israeli project and enhancing that. So all these create a premise for what you ask, whether how will impact the region, how will impact the balance of power. I think Israel become one of the strongest militarily. Israel has a lot of other aspects. Probably it might consider itself as a modern country, as a Western style of a political system, but it has weakness also because it cannot communicate or relate to the uh, kind of communities around Israel, to the culture within the region. It's hard to integrate organically into the region. So the more Israel considers itself as a modern, probably alienates more itself from the region, but it shows the power through that. So one could ask, can this power sustain the dominance of Israel, and will that be enough to reshape the region? I think United States will be there, and the United States came this time in a time that it was necessary, and or Israel could not do it itself. Therefore, I have argued in my last column the relationship goes into a proxy relationship between United States and Israel. That Israel could it like to the surprise of even Iranian, Israel started attacking Iran while the negotiation was underway. That was kind of surprised Iranian because Iranian always thinking Israel will never do that as long as the United States is not supporting or not giving green light. So it was Iranian expect that the attack, if it happen, it will happen when the negotiation is reaching a cul-de-sac or a deadlock or it's ending. But so their mindset was that the attack will come when the negotiation stops. But negotiation was underway and the attack came. That's I think also probably thinking from a very common way of thinking in the Middle East, the conspiracy theory, the negotiation was all to prepare the ground for the attack. But uh, if it's not like that, but contributed in a way to surprise Iranian, and surprise is the one of the most effective element of any military initiative or any kind of sort of this type of attack. So in that way, we have a new power, new way of communicating, and new balance. So here we go.
Let me ask you this. You referred to this proxy patron relationship emerging between the US and Israel. But doesn't, the fact that you mentioned that Israel took initiative on its own and attacked Iran, while the negotiations were still ongoing between Iran and the US. Doesn't that really challenge that notion of a patron proxy relationship between Israel and the US?
No, that all actually confirms it because the proxy has agency. A proxy is not fully like if you look at there are a lot of models of proxy, and a proxy is one of the fuzzy concepts that's really hard to define. Scholars came with almost 6 to 10 features of the proxies. One of the proxy and every type of proxies create its own features and establish its own features. So in that way, we could see if this, and I've heard from the Israeli themselves describing this relationship. So if you look at the Iran-Hezbollah relationship as a typical proxy relationship, Hezbollah had agency and could decide on certain things or not decide on certain things. So proxy has agency and also independence, and the the power that backs the proxy intervenes whether for different reason, for whether it is aid or kind of enhancing or protecting or supporting. But in this case, it United States came in when like the war showed that Israel can do it, but there are certain things Israel cannot do it because it requires weapon like B-2. Only United States has it, and it shows the uniqueness of the United States, the powerful of the United States, but also shows the powerful of Israel on a regional scale. So in that way, the two came together to kind of complete each other, and in a kind of both of them they had their own agency. Of course, if we go deeper, both United States and Israel have different agenda when it comes to Iran and how they want to see Iran, and we see that laying out in the differences between Netanyahu and Trump, the way that Trump pushing for peace, and probably that's not what pleases Israeli. So you see that the relationship, the two, they have a very close relationship on a many level, and but also they have their different agenda and they have their own agencies.
What about the ceasefire? Do you think the ceasefire is durable, or, like, is this conflict truly over, or are we likely to see further clashes in the near future?
I think now we see the stage after the ceasefire, and we hear that reports that what United States is offering Iran to come back on the negotiation table. Iranian are really doubting, and if you probably one of the best way to understand the Iranian mindset and the main decision maker is Ayatollah Khamenei. And Ayatollah Khamenei, one of the main worldview, the way he saw United States is always had the regime change agenda. So in that way, Khamenei sees the United States, no matter how much you um, basically give in to the United States, willing to go on a negotiation table, but United States has final goal has which is the change of regime. So and now that has proved actually Khamenei is right that the United States is willing to hit the regime and weaken the regime. So now the ceasefire depends on whether Iranian come back to the negotiation table and what will be on offer, and probably if there was a debate prior to the attack that Iran should have a zero enrichment, I think what we see and the hints from the United States coming that probably even not being discussed. And I think for Iranian that's difficult now to come to the table and forgets their nuclear project or nuclear um, aim, and or kind of set aside all their uranium and enrichment, all these process, because prior to the attack, Iranian were thinking that they are now on the level of enriching 60% of the uranium. And they have achieved that after all this year of negotiating, maneuvering, delaying, and they could go further rather than going back to totally dismantle the whole project. So I think the first thing regarding the ceasefire is whether the two sides trust each other, whether what they demand is reachable, whether Israel uh, kind of willing to accept Iran in a way that have potential to come back to the nuclear uh, project or nuclear power, and how a weakened Iran is behaving. We hear from Iranian it's today I read a report in Financial Times. It's a similar to 1967 Israeli moment when Israel were attacked and were threatened of kind of annihilation or removal to the sea, but Israeli managed to declare that they have nuclear weapon, and that probably saved them, or that showed their enemy that they are beyond annihilation or beyond removal to the sea, and they have the power that they could eliminate their enemy. And so whether Iran could do that or not, but I think United States has interest in not letting Iran to have weapon, because we know from the other cases, if Iran reaches that level, it will be like North Korea. And I think if Iran have a nuclear weapon, it will be let alone. And then the option of using military, it won't be easy, or it won't be on the table. Then it will be different type of deterrence. And I think neither US nor Europe, and obviously Israel, and also regional power don't want that. So I think it will be an interesting time for the future, uh, whether that will halt, or that basically it's possible to go back to a level that this power could negotiate, could exchange, could build sort of trust between them. As we head toward kind of a different type of a world of big power rivalry, of using more military, of going back to the nuclear as an option. So I think as much as I read, more convinced that yeah, it is the ceasefire will be short and won't hold, or it's difficult to convince Iranian that they will be safe if they give up their nuclear project or nuclear power and come back. And everybody knows that Iran doesn't want nuclear for electricity or for any other project, because you don't need 60% of enrichment and even more to do that. So in that way, there's a lot of distrust among the actors, and usually distrust leads to conflict.
Let's take a look at the internal Iranian scene. We know that Iran, has great internal diversity, ethnically, religiously, culturally. It has a large and sizable populations of Turks, Kurds, Arabs, Baluch, and Shia and Sunni and other religious groups in that country. What was at the stake for Iran's ethnic communities in particular, who have been, politically active, some of them more so than the rest, but they have been the bastions of opposition to the regime for quite a long time. What was at stake for Iran's ethnic communities during this conflict, and especially now in the aftermath of this conflict?
Iran is one of the oldest imperial power in the world. Um, and that means people around the center has accepted the power of the center. But I think we see sort of end of that. We see fractions. In 1979, when Iranian Revolution happened, only Kurds were unhappy with the change or with the way the change went. But now we see emergence of identity of all the other different ethnics within Iran. We see Baluchs, we see Arabs and kind of show their uh, wishes or demonstrated, or there were violence clash where and I think in Azeri they might be passive, but they have their own identity, and they will have their backers from the countries around them or neighboring them. So in that way, it probably uh, yeah, if anything happen in Iran, if the whether well, there will be different government or different or regime, I think people within Iran they won't be quiet as before, and they will push for their recognition, for their participation, for their identity. And in that way, I think Iran will not be the similar centralized uh, kind of government could rule over all these differences within the periphery in a minority Persian speaking. I think about 30% of Iran are Persians, and the rest are different language and culture um, and what we see also, the Iranian nationalism that emerged is very sensitive to this and is not an inclusive nationalism. It's not nationalism that able to take this difference in a plurality. So in that way, I think we have a recipe for either kind of decentralized Iran or a federal Iran or a different form of this strict centralization. But for an imperial power, such a long empire like Iran, it will always be difficult to give up that history. And I think similar to Turkey, that will always shape the politic, whether it's a nostalgia or kind of a dream or uh, material for this nationalism, and so that will remain. And I think it will be probably more practical or beneficial for Iranian to see that different. That I think Henry Kissinger once said Iran has to decide whether it's a state or a cause. And probably if it's cause, then it's imperial mission, and probably that dilemma will remain and will probably become stronger in the future in Iran, because now with the spread of education, with the technology, with the access to the world, it's not easy for one power in the middle or in the center to impose its hegemony over the other, and other accepts it without any resistance. So probably we will see different debate, different Iran in the future.
I'm sure you were following when this conflict was ongoing between Israel and Iran. One of the major thing that was being debated among analysts and observers was what was Israel seeking, whether it was seeking, a project of regime change, or whether it was just trying to, militarily weaken and degrade Iranian capabilities and destroy or greatly damage the nuclear program. And amid, all that debate, there was an expectation, or at least people were watching very closely to see whether Iranians inside the country would rise up. And there was also, in particular, a good amount of focus on the Kurds by virtue of Kurds being both as a community, but also the, Kurdish opposition political parties being one of the most organized and politically active groups in the country. We did not, however, see any activity really, either at the popular level in Iranian Kurdistan, the Kurdish parts of Iran, or at the level of the, Kurdish political parties. Why do you think we saw that type of response from the Kurds, both, as at the popular level and also at the level of the political, opposition political groups?
I think it was quite obvious that people in a time like that, they wait and see first. Second, I think it is hard for any group to make a move in such a time because immediately will be labeled as backed by the outsider or working on the agenda of the outsider or a traitor or things. So, and third, I think the regime has never hesitated to use force or to use violence for maintains its survival. And at this time, probably it will be more inclined to use violence. So, and above all, I think people don't know what will happen, so they wait and see, say whether how far this goes, what will be the implication. And I think people have learned that eventually the agenda of these countries is not their one, their the kind of the Kurdish agenda or a Baluchis agenda or Arab agenda. So eventually, this country they kind of pursue their own agenda, and that might not end kind of in their interest, or they might betray them. And I think the immediate call for a peace and end of the violence probably seen by these people. See, if we have moved, now the regime survives and regime will be attacking us. So, for all these reasons, it's not rational for anyone and at this moment to make a move. And I think neither Israeli nor American have a good history of backing people who are moving within the other country, and because eventually they look for agitator or an instrument in order to push their own agenda. So, and for all these reasons, I think people didn't make a move. And we also have to remember it was not long ago that Iranian people kind of revolted against the Iranian government in the revolution happened that with the killing of the Kurdish girl Amini. So in that way, I think these are all present in the memory of the people. That all set kind of a framework. People wanted to know what actually happens, how far this will go, what will be the outcome. And at this time probably is the most dangerous time. And I think it was not easy to organize anything within Iran at this moment because of lack of communication, because of the bombardment or all these things. So probably somehow foolish from Israeli to feel that we are bombing from the sky and people move on the ground and then the regime will end. It probably is not that straightforward.
It was also notable that, a good chunk of the Israeli strikes were focused in the Kurdish parts of Iran, in the Kermanshah, Kurdistan, and Elam provinces, where, IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, is known to have major military bases, missile bases. And there was some speculation that some of this might be actually, the sort of the considerable focus in those areas by the Israelis might have been meant to sort of, greatly weaken the Islamic Republic's military forces capabilities in those areas. Whether that's true or no, we don't know. But staying on the topic of Kurds in Iran, it's interesting that there wasn't really a response in terms of any movement, either at the popular level or at the level of the Kurdish opposition parties. Do you think moving forward from here, will this kind of help create a kind of atmosphere where the Islamic Republic might be more likely to be more attentive to the Kurdish demands, especially, given that they did not rise up or do anything that would challenge the government's authority at a time of great stress and strain at the government of Iran witnessed during those 12 days? Or, now that the regime is weakened and frankly humiliated by Israel during those 12 days of war, are we going to see the regime become even more aggressive toward Kurds and other politically active ethnic minorities in the country?
I think watching Iranian media, Iranian are or Iranian government are struggling how to deal with this, what they call kind of rally behind the flag, and how to maintain that, whether by opening up or becoming kind of more nationalistic in a way, not kind of not the national kind of ethnic nationalistic, but more Iranian nationalistic, trying to include all. I think these are all on the debate, and I think Iranian government felt lucky or saw that as an unexpected outcome, and how to maintain that. I think that's a big question within the circle in Tehran and probably elsewhere within the government elite, and the way that could that be continued? Could that how that whether the end of the hostility or end of the attacks will end that rally also? But probably if the Iranian government thinking that people supported the government, it probably is a wrong interpretation for that. Um, we still don't know how that will be interpreted, but what we see or what we hear from the news, that Iran is trying to deal with a big shock within the country, that people that labeled or called as a spy and to kind of arrest them. And I was thinking that, will Iran goes the way that North Korea, because Iran has told all the foreigners to leave the country, whether they try to totally isolate themselves further and kind of leave the international community and become a sort of a place that nobody could access, or nobody have knowledge, or nobody could communicate with, in a way to pacify everything within the country. So I think now it's open whether it go further attack or violence or threat or fear, spreading fear among the population, or yeah, possibility of changing and make opening up. However, I doubt it in the current system, because the Iranian government is less confident. For any system to open up, it requires confidence, and that confidence is not there now. I think currently the Iranian are dealing with a number of traumas. I think one of them is that their loneliness. Nobody came to support them, and the international or a big power in the region or in the world, they came and attacked them. Probably European didn't participate, but I'm sure they were happy. Probably Iranian expect something more from Chinese or the Russian, and they were not there. So Iranian probably remembered the Iran-Iraq war period that they were almost. I think the Chinese came into the help in middle 80s, but for for many years they were on their own, and they fought the war. So that created this sort of loneliness within the Iran, and now it's back to that loneliness. Probably they thought they have overcome that in the last decade or two. Now probably this trauma, I kind of doubt in current circumstances Iran will start negotiation with Kurdish parties or with the other group, or opening up to the uh, and I think that will extend to the negotiation with the United States, that Trump tries to this company go into the Iran and invest in Iran and building these nuclear. Probably Iran at the current circumstances at this time, at this moment, probably will be very hesitant to allow these company coming into the country and working there. These usually Western companies. So in that way, I kind of, even if Iran is willing to open up, probably is not happening now or anytime soon. Yeah.
Let's move to Iraq, where, Iran has lots of influence, as you know. One thing that was very interesting with the, lack of reaction from the Iraqi armed factions, Shia armed factions, generally known as Muqawma or resistance groups, who have been part of the Iranian-led axis of resistance for the past couple of decades, some of them even longer, going all the way back to the 80s. Why didn't these pro-Iranian armed factions in Iraq get involved in this conflict? It kind of, begs the question of what is the strategic value of these groups to Iran if they wouldn't intervene at a moment of dire need for Iran, like we saw during the 12-day war between Iran and Israel.
There are two or more interpretation. One straightforward interpretation: these militant groups, they got rich, they got access to the wealth, and they are not willing to risk that. They are supporting on as far as there is no threat. Like, they were very vocal on social media and very active on these platforms, but that was all. Uh, a second interpretation, it could be Iranian strategy itself, because Iran knows if this group move, they might get hit. And if they get hit, they get weakened, or they will be overruled by their competitor or their enemy within Iraq. And Iran doesn't want that. Then that will be big loss of influence of Iran in Iraq. And I think Iraq is one of the most important country in the world for Iran. So if these groups move, and their move probably won't achieve anything, but it has a potential or a possibility that weakens them or destroy them, and then Iran will lose total power in the country, and that won't benefit Iran. So probably the rational calculation came like that. And in addition, that this probably the leader of this group, they were not enthusiastic themselves. They didn't want to die. They want to enjoy what they have achieved or gained, or and the other thing, I think, probably Iran is not only afraid of Israel and United States, probably afraid of domestic and afraid of its neighbor. So it doesn't want to spread the war or intervene other into their neighbor, and probably that will open the gate for the other to intervene. And So in that way, I think for these three reasons, primarily, that's why the Iraqi militia did not move. And I think it will the Shia community in Iraq probably calculated that will lead to weaken them and in future probably harm them in governing Iraq or maintaining their power in Iraq. So within the Shia community itself, probably not only the militia but the others, there was this understanding this move might not achieve something, but uh, probably will harm us not only now but also in the future. So all these reasons probably was behind the Iraqi militias inactive in the current circumstances.
I think it was also interesting, that this was probably one of those moments of, great test of patron-proxy relations, right? While the conflict was going on, at times there were signs or indication that Israel might be actually seeking regime change, and they might be able to target the political leadership just the way that they did the military leadership. And I think the fact that we saw the Iraqi armed factions and the Shia groups generally being so cautious, provides a good reason as one of those moments of really testing this whole notion of a
There,
patron and
there were
proxy relationship.
confirmed kind of within the Iraqi community, within Iraqi media or the local media, that Iran has asked this group to show their support because in kind of many group who are considered to be Iranian ally, even they didn't condemn, didn't dare to condemn, even especially in the early days of the attack, the Israeli and later on the US attack. So in that way, uh, like they didn't respond to, they thought probably it's over.
Right. Let's get to the Iraqi Kurdish leadership's response to this war between Israel and Iran. How would you characterize, the relationship of the Kurdistan regional government and, in particular, its two major parties, the Kurdistan Democratic Party and the Patriotic Union of Kurdistan, keeping in mind, that the Iranian and Iraqi Kurdish relationship historically has been an uneasy and tense relationship for all sorts of reasons and purposes. And we had Iran target, Iraqi Kurdistan, in particular Erbil, with ballistic missiles a few years ago, probably one of the early, examples of Iran testing the accuracy of its ballistic missiles as well. So, how would you characterize the response of the Iraqi Kurdish leadership to this conflict?
I think despite the tense relation between the kind of Iraqi Kurd and Iranian, there's also historical long, big, kind of deep relationship between the two sides, and I think if the kind of pro-Iranian militia did not do anything, so why the Kurds should do anything? So there was no reason for the Kurd to kind of take part in this, and they probably also try to maintain the neutrality because Iran, no matter what happened in Iran, Iran will remain as a neighbor, and Iran will still remain strong enough to put pressure on these political parties. Um, and I think that's the only probably good option they had because they could not be part of the conflict, or they could not afford to be part or take a side or anything. And but probably they we have seen from the presidency of the KRG that they are kind of if I remember, they are kind of for end of the conflict, or they are not. Yes, they don't see war as a way to deal with this issue, and they show their happiness when the conflict or ended, and so. From this perspective, probably Kurds were stressed where the fighting happened, and uh, yeah, Iran, it has been a country that has put pressure on Kurdistan, but also the collapse of Iran as a state will create a lot of different pressure for Iraq and for Iraqi Kurdistan, whether it is instability, whether it is movement of people, whether it is how that country will emerge, and if it's not easy if you have a big neighbor like that, it's unstable, and with a in a time that all these intervention happen anywhere if the country collapse. So probably these also were in the mind of these people, that like this country hasn't been easy with us. Nevertheless, we have a good relation, but if anything happened, probably it has a risk also, and we cannot influence much in that regard. So probably Kurd had no any other option apart from being neutral in the.
You made some great points. I think one thing that we have seen, has remained consistent between the Pahlavi regime under the Shah and the Islamic Republic is that the, strategic fundamentals of the relationship between Kurds in Iraq and Iran don't really change much, right? And the geographical determinism and the fact that Iran and Iraqi Kurdistan are neighbors will supersede many other considerations, and will probably answer some of the questions of some other actors in the region or beyond who might have expected, the Iraqi Kurds to act differently. There was today an interesting article in Tasnim News Agency, which is the mouthpiece of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, and it basically depicted very positively the Iraqi Kurdistan's reaction to the conflict and the fact, that the Kurds did not do anything that would make the Islamic Republic unhappy, and that the Kurds kept their borders with Iran secure. There was no threat basically posed to Iran from those from the shared border between Iraqi Kurdistan and Iran. Do you think, not that I think we should be reading too much into that article, but given the fact that it was published in an official mouthpiece of the IRGC, and given the general improvement in the relationship over the past year or so, do you think we should expect the ties between the KRG, the Kurdistan Regional Government, and Iran, to improve even further after this conflict, or what do you expect to happen?
Um, I think I don't know what Iranian expect. The fact that the kind of no threat or no kind of I think Iran had in mind that a lot of things came into Iran came from somewhere, and probably now I haven't seen that Tansim article, but that shows probably they think it's not nothing happened like that from this border, so it probably happened elsewhere, and so in that regard, I think it in the mind of the Iraqi Kurdistan people, one thing is important in this relationship is how Iran shapes the behavior of Baghdad vis-a-vis Erbil. And I think probably their direct relationship is not that important, but that triangle is much more important, because what Iran, the way Iran behaves toward KRG is the way that the kind of shaping it or influencing it through Baghdad. So probably one of the big issue KRG facing it now is not able to sell oil, not able to receive salary, and all this has to do somehow with whether Iran will be telling Baghdad, will you be treating KRG better, or limit KRG or put pressure on KRG. So in that way, probably Iran still plays big role even within the domestic relationship, or even between Baghdad and Erbil. And in that regard, if Iran is happy, probably that contribute in the better relationship between Baghdad and Erbil, and that will be something I think Kurdistan is waiting for now, because as we know, the whole situation is very tense because of financial issue, and the whole now Baghdad is deciding whether Kurdistan gets salary or not. There are a lot of complexity behind that, but now the current situation is like that, and Iran still can influence that in a big way. Uh, I don't know how much I could read from that article, but any positive gesture probably contributes into that.
Let's get to the Kurds in Turkey and the Turkey leg of this situation. We saw that Turkish leaders, whether Erdogan or his governing coalition partner Devlet Bahçeli, both expressing very serious concern over the Israeli military campaign against Iran, and Erdogan even said that this was an attempt to redraw the borders of the region, something, that the Turkish political establishment has been historically very paranoid about. On the other side, there were some interesting statements from the two top Kurdish leaders in Turkey, both of them who are actually in jail. Abdullah Öcalan, the leader of the PKK, or the Kurdistan Workers' Party, and Selahattin Demirtas, who was the former, basically presidential contender in Turkey. So Öcalan was quoted in an article by Aydınlık as having said to MPs from the People's Equality and Democracy Party, the DEM party, that Israel was seeking some sort of Gazification of the region, and that Turkey and Iran were now, going to be the targets. And he presented himself as the one who could help Turkey withstand, this regional shock coming toward Turkey. Demirtas also, issued a statement. He condemned Iranian violation of Kurdish rights and broader human rights in Iran, but he also portrayed the Israeli campaign against Iran as some sort of an, broader imperialist design for the region, which basically goes to show that the major Kurdish leaders in Turkey were also critical of the Israeli campaign, to put it that way. First of all, what does all of that mean? These statements from the Turkish leaders and the Kurdish leaders in Turkey, and what it means in terms of how Kurds see these regional developments affecting them and their fate inside Turkey.
I think Turkey.
Very briefly, if you can.
Yeah, this is not an answer. This is not a question for a brief answer, but let's go. Turkey is not happy with the probably in some way Turkey is happy with a weak Iran, but with a end of Iranian role in the region. Turkey was happy to see the end of Iran and Syria, but probably Turkey is not happy with the rise of Israel, and we saw that came into a very conflictual point in Syria, and Turkey still sees Syria as a space that they could have military bases and access and get closer to the Gulf and have more influence in the Gulf country. And Israel is probably trying to limit that or intervene in that, whether Israel wants to be the one who benefits from the Gulf countries. There's if Israel becomes the main regional power, Turkey competes with that. And when Turkey competes with that, so Kurds are inhabiting within this Turkish sphere. I think it will be very difficult for any for any Kurdish politician to come out and support Israel in Turkey. And we have to keep in mind that these two main Kurdish politicians are in jail, so they are not totally free to express themselves. But even if they are free, I don't think they will come out to support Israel, because that will create a lot of pressure on them. And that's the reality of the situation. I think I wouldn't have expect other way. And historically, PKK has kind of seen Israel as kind of in a leftish way, as a settler, colonialism, as a power that doesn't belong to the region. And that's not over yet. But I think that probably shouldn't apply to the Kurd in Syria. I think Kurd in Syria are in different circumstances. And between the two, I think, and I coming back to what we have said at the early of the conversation, that we are entering a proxy era, or empire through proxy, or a proxy relationship thing. And I think now there's a fight or a kind of competition between Israel and Turkey, how to use the Kurdish cause for their interest, and how to and attract Kurdish. Whether I think it's the rational way of Kurd to think, where's my interest, or what can I gain from that? Because these two powers are rivalry, and I cannot be sandwiched between them, or geographically they're sandwiched between them, but eventually who I am dealing with, and who I am demanding my right from, and how that could play. I think if Israel pushing for Kurd to be pro-Israel, but that has kind of it's a risky enterprise for any Kurd to take, especially you cannot guarantee their security, you cannot protect, or on the other hand, you alienate Kurd from the whole region. So it's a very difficult for Kurd to move in that direction. Nevertheless, I think it's not Kurdish duty to become kind of more kind of royal than the king themselves. It's part of the conflict in the region. I think Kurds should see it from the Kurdish interest and Kurdish perspective. Nevertheless, not contributing into the harm of any other. I think this is not. It could be a win-win game. It's not that I win and you lose, or in that way. And Turkey is going through a very difficult period internally, and for any politician to move or make such any wrong step, I think will have a big repercussion and big impact on not only on themselves, but probably on their community also. Now, Turkey domestically, I think, heading toward a period probably less stable and divisive, and any party making any decision probably will be branded as traitor or enemy, or siding with the other, or that's something part of the Turkish psyche, that they have been stabbed from behind by the Arabs during the Ottoman, and that they lost. And so all these things is not, and history in the Middle East is not history. It's always present. So in that way, it's very hard to deal with that. And I wouldn't have expect different kind of attitude from these Kurdish leaders.
Well, on that note, let's end this episode of GeoSpace. Thank you so much, Sardar, for your insights today and for helping us unpack such a truly complex set of issues. Sardar is an expert on Kurdish and Middle Eastern regional affairs. A quick reminder also, we have an article on the New Regions website written by yours truly on the implications of the Israel-Iran conflict for the Kurds. You will find the link alongside this episode on the New Regions website. And thanks to you, our audiences, for tuning in. We'll see you in 2 weeks for the next episode of GeoSpace.